Hey guys, welcome back from lunch. I hope your lunch was as good as mine. It's a big bread thing, so to avoid falling asleep, I've got some coffee for the afternoon. Alright, so we're going to do another session on DevTools, and later this afternoon we'll do some more web component stuff. We're going to dive into web tools some more. Hopefully this presentation will sort of get the second half of it. Again, I don't have any slides prepared, but I'll just kind of walk you through it. So feel free to raise your hand, ask questions if there's something that confuses you or not sure. Also, feel free to pull up DevTools on your own laptops and follow along. Try it, see how it works. One thing to keep in mind, I'm actually running 2 versions ahead on Chrome. So you might, if something looks slightly different, that might be the reason. I'm actually running on Chrome 44, which is the beta branch. The beta release. You can actually get the beta or the dev channels release for Chrome, which is kind of cool. You get to see kind of what's coming up, which is also sometimes broken, so that's the trade-off.
Is that the same as Canary?
So Canary is even more beta. So you have Canary, which is practically nightly as far as I know. Actually, I think you have nightly as well, which is even more unstable than Canary. So you have nightly Canary, and then you have the release channels for the main Chrome. So I think they go dev, beta, stable. Sometimes I mix up dev and beta. But yeah.
You ever use Parakeet?
No.
Oh man, if you're in the know, you use Parakeet.
only the cool kids that.
I'm just making that up.
Yeah. All right. DevTools. So we had ended on the sources section. The sources tab here. Remember we have 7 or 8 tabs here. 8 tabs with DevTools. We're on the third one, sources, and we're looking at the source files for our code. And I've included a foo.js file, so that's what we're sort of playing around with this here. I have one place in this code where I have an exception where I'm accessing .length on undefined. So you'll notice that right there. It's actually, you can also mouse over the little X that comes with that, and it will tell you what the error is. Uncut type error, cannot read properly length of undefined. As you do more development and you get more errors, you'll start to see the same errors over and over again. And it is important to read what the error is, because it will help you figure it out. Though keep in mind that sometimes the error will happen kind of further back on the call stack. So it's usually a symptom of something further back in your code somewhere. So for example here, I have letter is a thing, but letter is being passed in as undefined, and so to see that's an error, remember I can set a breakpoint here, or actually rather what would be easier would be setting pause on exceptions, which is that little button, and reloading that. And then when I get the exception, it'll tell me length undefined. And remember, I can look at the call stack here and see that, this function, log val, is being called from down here. And so I can go through and see that. Now we'll talk a little bit about, well, let me remove that breakpoint there. Well, we'll still pause on exceptions, but I'm going to put a breakpoint in myself right there. Run it again. I'm going to stop on breaking down that line. It's not necessarily an error. In fact, it's actually not at this point. I just put a breakpoint in. I'll talk about a little bit about these developer tools right over here. In particular, these first 2. We've already seen play. We've already seen that. We have this next one here that looks like a little arc of an arrow over a little dot. And then the next one that's a down arrow to a dot. So the first one is step over next function call. And the other one is step into next function call. So both of these are the same thing in that they allow you to step through the execution of your program. The difference with the first one is that this will step over any other function calls and will just sort of keep going in your normal function scope, whereas the second one will step into a particular function. And then this third one with the up arrow isn't as common, but that will step out of a function if you stepped into one. So I can click through here. And what I'll see is that after log val executes, kind of keep going, then I go to my loop, and then I go through my loop. But you'll notice, sometimes it'll go into the function because I have that there. If I wanted to dive into the function. Actually, in this case, they're both doing the same thing. Depending on your function scope, you may be going into a function anyhow. We don't really have something more complex. Take a look here. Generally, this is what you want. Generally, the curved arrow is going to be what you need to step through things. And that'll just, you can sort of just keep going. And you notice up here, actually, if I reload this, Chrome has been nice enough to tell me here that letter equals A right now. And that's because I'm on the first iteration of this loop. If I click through, click through, click through, click through, click through, there we go. You notice it flashed, and now it equals B, because I've got into that function again. And it's just going to tell me that, and you'll get those little helpful pieces. You can also mouse over something, and here I moused over letter, and it tells me B. That's what the value is currently. And again, down here, that will tell me letter is B. I can also mouse over like length here, and now I've got letter.length, and I get it as 1, because it's a string and it has 1 character specified. So at any point here, I can mouse over anything and see what the value is. I can even mouse over an array like this. This one's, right here as well, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just being passed through as a variable, and it'll give me more information about the array. And it also gives me these properties on the object. If this were an object, I might have a whole bunch of these. In this case, I just have length and the prototype of the array. So there's really a lot of information. You can sort of just explore here and see what we have. We even have like console, which is the built-in object. That's less interesting. I don't even know what's in here. Oh, look, JavaScript heap size. Not super useful, but you can see where it all is. You can see that this is a function. It'll give you that, and it'll actually give you the line where the function is, and then click, and it will highlight it. So there's a lot that's going on here. So if you're debugging things, when you're writing code, right, debugging at first I think seems like the tiresome part that no one wants to do, but it actually can be pretty fun. You get to kind of solve interesting problems, and you can figure out exactly what the issue is. There's a lot of tools that make that easy for you. So any questions on the source debugging here?
I think it'd be fun to do that as an exercise, just so we all get our hands on, but maybe we could save that till the end of your presentation.
Yeah, I'll put together some code for an exercise. If I get a chance this afternoon, we'll do it. If not, I'll make sure that'll be one of our code sprints for tomorrow.
Or you could build in an error into one of those.
I could do that.
Can you show again how you did the console thing? You said you can put console log in your...
How to console, what was that you're looking at?
Just click on that again.
Sure, so right now, this isn't really going to help because I'm not paused. I can't really do much unless I'm paused. Once I'm paused, because I have a, here I'm paused because I have an exception.
How do you pause it again? Do the pause?
So there are a couple of ways to pause it. You can set a debugger statement, right? In my code, I could set a debugger, debugger semicolon. That's going to pause it when it gets to this point. I can also set a breakpoint by clicking right here. That's going to set a breakpoint, so it's going to pause when it gets to this point. I can also set a conditional breakpoint, so similar to a breakpoint. I right-click, say add conditional breakpoint, and I give it a value for when it's going to stop. And then I can also say pause on exceptions. So if I pause on exceptions, which I have set up here, that's this little blue thing in the corner. It's not blue if it's not selected, it's blue if it is selected. And that allows me to pause on exceptions. One thing that I want to point out here is this thing that says pause on caught exceptions. It's hard to see when I zoom in, so. It says pause on caught exceptions. By default, when I click pause, it's only going to pause on exceptions that are uncaught, that get thrown. I don't know how much you did with JavaScript exceptions in the last few weeks. Not at all? Okay. Quick lesson on exceptions. Exception means something has gone wrong. We see some exceptions get thrown for us. An exception is thrown. That's the verb that happens when an error goes wrong. So like having an error occur is equivalent to saying it's thrown an exception. Some exceptions get thrown for us when we do things that don't work, like access a property on undefined. That's not going to work, but we can also manually throw exceptions. So let's see. I can throw foo. If I have my syntax right here. I have paused on that exception, so that exists. But if I just reload and don't, notice we have uncaught foo. It'll tell me that it has an error foo. So I can just throw my own exceptions. For more information, MDM exceptions. Also, just prefix all your searches about JavaScript questions with MDM, can make life a lot easier. Filters out things that aren't helpful. So you can also just do new error. Yeah, new error might be the more technical. No, you can throw new error. You can do that. So throw new error, and you can pass in a particular message. So if I say that, throw new error. Whoops. Where did I go? Here we go. So in that case, I'll hear uncaught error. Whoops. And I can click, and this just works like a normal error. So this is how actually when I write code, or when you write code, and you know something should be an error, but it might not necessarily be like an official error, but you know you've gone down a code path that you shouldn't have. You can throw errors there, and then the browser will throw an error. You can, or throw an exception. You can also catch exceptions. Throw and catch. You can catch exceptions. So if you want to say you expect that there might be an error, so you want to catch that and do something with it, you can do that. So with catching an exception, we use a try catch. So with a try catch here, what we'll do here is we say try, and then we try something. You would never really try throw an error, right? But what's going to happen in a try catch is anything between these brackets, if it throws an exception, you can catch that exception and not actually have that error out. So let's try this. So if I say try, actually I'll do that with the existing error here. So we had an error get thrown up here with letter.length, right? So if I say try, what I can do is try, open curly, close curly, catch, and catch is going to take an argument here. The argument is the error object, and then I can say console.log caught error and e. By the way, when you console.log, you can just continue adding arguments like this with a comma, and that will console.log those out as well. You could also just do this, do a plus. The problem is this will stringify that any objects there, because it's just going to concatenate them. And so I actually want to see the object in console, so this is a nicer, it's going to give me more information about it. And I can certainly do that with a string too. I can say another, and then I can say and that would work as well. So I'll just throw error. So now what's going to happen is, oops, go over here. I'll reload, and notice here it'll say caught error, and then it passed in the error. But this isn't red. This isn't like the browser telling me there's an error. This is me console logging it. If I actually take out that console log, I don't get anything. But if I take out that try catch, and I just leave it with the console log that I know if there's an exception when I try to access the property undefined, now I'm going to get the error. So that's how you do try catches in JavaScript. All languages have exceptions in different ways, or most languages do, I guess. But this is how we do it in JavaScript. This is how you throw something. This is how you catch something. Yeah, so the point, before I got off on the tangent there, was that, with caught errors, if I set pause on exceptions and I reload, I'm not actually going to pause. I never pause there, right? Not pause. Not pause. I never paused, and the reason was I caught that exception. So the browser said, well, you caught it. You meant to do that, right? I can say pause on caught exceptions too, if I do want to pause on any exception caught or not. Then I reload, and now it's going to pause. So if you're catching an exception and you want it to pause when you catch it, just set that option there. It only appears when you hit pause. The other thing, let's stop pausing. If I just put a breakpoint here, I can click this over here. It says deactivate breakpoints, and that's going to deactivate any existing breakpoints, and it's just going to skip them altogether. And you notice it sort of grays this out over here. It's hard to see, but yeah, you can see it grays it out. Now again, when I reload, it's just going to keep on going. It's not going to go through any of the breakpoints. So if you're debugging and you have like 5 breakpoints, and then you're like, never mind, I just want to go through the whole thing, you can hit deactivate breakpoints, and it'll just temporarily deactivate them until you click it again. You can also, if you set a breakpoint, Again, sometimes it doesn't show in that side panel, but up here you can click through those. This is that same button, that icon is a step over. It's the same one as is in source. Now down here. All right. Any questions about source? We will do an exercise with that. I'll throw something together so we can debug that. For now, that's all those features. You can also hide that side panel with this little thing. All right, well, there's one other type of breakpoint, and that's a DOM breakpoint. So the DOM, remember, is all this stuff here? All of these objects? Yeah?
You mentioned that you could use those errors in your code.
Yep.
So what are some examples that you can actually use?
Let's see. Let's say, the question was, what are the examples for throwing exceptions in your own code? Let's say, for example, I don't use them very often, so I'm trying to think of one. Because usually there are more graceful ways to handle it, like logging or an error or something. Yeah.
I know in Go programming, I seem to recollect that, like, you know, at certain points, if something doesn't happen, you just want your whole application to crash. Like if it's I don't know, it's trying to connect to some remote data service and it needs that to run and it can't connect, don't do anything else from this point forward. You know, so if the error is like no connection, then when you get that, stop the whole program.
Yeah, that's a good example. Or maybe make an AJAX call. Did you guys do AJAX at all with JavaScript? Okay. So maybe make an AJAX call and the data comes back empty or something. That's not technically an exception, but maybe that's actually, you know that that's an error for your program. You could throw an exception there. And yeah, your program is going to fail there, or you're at least going to throw an exception in JavaScript. However, you can catch that exception, right? So maybe another part of your program can say, okay, well, if it's empty, I'm going to try again. Or if it's empty, I'll get the local data instead. So you can still handle that, which is good. It's just telling the rest of your program, hey, something went wrong with me, and that's a problem. Deal with that how you like. And you know, you really should try to throw some information with the error. You can make custom error types, custom error objects. I won't go into that. MDN has more details than I could give you.
So there's also, it comes to mind just the overlap between validation and errors. And so if you're asking for somebody's, you know, I don't know, credit card number and they enter letters, well, you can write code to validate and catch that. But if you don't and you're expecting numbers and you know, and it's a strongly typed language that, you know, if you give it the wrong data, it'll throw an error, you know.
Yeah, validation validation in JavaScript releases usually handle, honestly, I've never handled it with throwing an error, but usually you handle it with like conditionals, but you certainly could. You could set up your architecture to do that. Try catches are probably rated more often than throwing your own errors, because try catches, remember, will catch things, or you can try to do things even if you're not throwing the exception, but it could throw an exception. Right, so in this case, you know, I shouldn't need to do this, right, but maybe for whatever reason I know I can end up with letter being undefined. So if I wrap in and try catch, I don't have to worry about that stalling my whole program. I can deal with it and move on. Yeah, those are try catches. It's a good statement to know how to use in JavaScript. Okay, so there's one other breakpoint that I want to talk about. I'm going to set a document, query selector, body, inner HTML equals letter. It's going to destroy everything in my code here. That's fine, or everything in the DOM. So if I reload, let's see, we have inner HTML DOM. Oh, because I probably can't select body here. What we'll do is we'll select this header. So I'll say navbar header.
Are you trying to use letter as a variable?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm writing this too early, that's why.
Yeah.
I'm running it before. Yeah. No, I know I'm not. Well, yes, I am. But
What's letter?
Did you find it?
yeah, sorry, I defined it as the argument for my function. It's nothing special. It's just the reason that's not working is because I'm running my JavaScript first before the DOM is built up. So if I run it after, cool. So now I'm actually changing the header here. I'm gonna remove that. I'm just gonna zoom out so I can read this. So in my script here, I'm going to stop doing the less than or equal to, which doesn't help. And then this way, I will show the letter. All right, so this is going to show the last letter, and it's going to replace the header with the last letter. It's doing nothing special. The reason I'm demonstrating this is because I can do another kind of breakpoint here, and that's a DOM breakpoint. So I'm actually going to do this in a set timeout. So we'll set, we won't actually start this until set timeout function. So I'll do this 2 seconds after the page loads. So 1, 2, change the header. Okay? What I want to demonstrate here is that, I'm going to change this to 5 seconds. All right. What I want to demonstrate is a new kind of breakpoint called a DOM breakpoint. So, in this case, I want to set a breakpoint when something changes in the DOM. When you have to do DOM manipulation, this is something that sometimes you want to know about. You want to know what code changes something in my HTML, changes something in the DOM. So what I can do is I can right click here and I can say break on, and these are my DOM breakpoint options. Let me pull this up here.
Wow, I never knew that existed.
Yeah, this is really useful. So we have 3 options here: break on subtree modifications, break on attribute modifications, and break on node removal. And those signs sound sort of complicated, but I'll step through them now. So remember, the DOM is a tree. So break on subtree modifications means break on when the tree under me changes. When that tree is modified, it's a breakpoint. So stop, pause, tell me what's going on, and what broke that, or what modified that. The next one is attributes modifications. So attributes modifications will break whenever one of these attributes, like class or ID or whatever these attributes are here, whenever any of those change, break. And then the last one is node removal. And so that will break when the node is removed.
And are you setting those on a per node basis, or?
Yes.
Okay. So whatever node you click, that's where you set it.
Exactly. Yep. And then you'll be able to see it. So if I set node removal here, and I go into source, put this down so I can see it. Now under DOM breakpoints here, I have body node removed. So I'm just going to show that breakpoint there. It's a different kind of breakpoint than the ones up here. So if I put a breakpoint here, you'll notice that shows up in breakpoints. DOM breakpoints is still there as the separate DOM breakpoint. So these are really helpful. Again, you can uncheck it if you don't want to break on it. What I'm going to do is set a breakpoint, and you can uncheck it here if you undo it. So you right click, break on, subtree modifications. That may or may not throw. Yeah, because I'm not actually changing the tree, I'm just changing the value of something in the tree. Oh, actually, no, I didn't set it at all. Oh, because once I reload the page, they go away. So here's what I'll do is I'll reload. So here, the problem is, it's going to happen too quickly for me to set the breakpoint. Usually this is more useful for DOM manipulation that doesn't happen on page load. That's why I set the delay. Let me just set a longer delay here. So 15,000 milliseconds. All right, so now I'm going to go to my header here.
10 seconds left. 9, 8, 7.
And say break on subtree modifications.
4, 3.
Oh, All right, let's see if we got it this time. Nope. All right, I will come up with a better example for that. We'll
That's
demo that
cool.
later. But that is helpful when you get it to work. And you can see your DOM breakpoints here. All right, they disappear later. All right, so I think those are all the major breakpoints. You can do Ajax breakpoints as well. We won't go into detail on that right now. Right now we're going to pull up the next tab here that we haven't talked about yet, and this is going to be the network tab.
There's so much in developers' tools.
And I'm only covering the tip of the iceberg here. So this is the network tab. This is incredibly useful. I'm going to zoom out so you can see all of it. So network tab is anything that goes over the wire, anything that's happening, anything that's being imported into our document. And so it's always going to start with this request for the document, for index.html or whatever the name of your document is. And then, because it says other for initiator, because the browser initiated that, everything else is going to be initiated by the index file itself. You get some really useful information here. So you get the type of document it is, or the type of request it is. So starting with the document, then we had a style sheet, CSS, JavaScript, script, PNG image, then more scripts. We have our documents, we have our HTML imports. We also have the size over here. So this is going to have all the sizes of these items. So you can see what the bigger items are that are downloading. Then you have your timeline, and let me see if I can resize this in a way that's a little more helpful. For some reason it's not. But you'll notice as I scroll down in the timeline, you see things sort of, they start at different points. We can actually take a look at that more in the timeline section when we get there.
You know what's fun to look at on the timeline here?
What?
Fresno City College's website.
It says no, don't do it. Don't do
Because
it.
you get a lot of really long stretches.
It says, please don't do it.
You also have some really interesting information down here at the bottom. Let me try to pull this up so we can see it. So we have information in the aggregate here, so we have like 16 requests total. I know it's hard to see this. I don't think it zooms. Wish it might. Nope, not working very well. All right, so it tells you how many requests. How many requests are currently being shown. I just reloaded that so it didn't show them all, but I'll show I selected, that's why it was breaking. You can select part of that waterfall if you want to see what's being requested. But you see how many requests there are, 16. You see how many bytes were transferred. It's how long it took to finish. And then you have these two benchmarks. One DOM content loaded, when all the content in the DOM was loaded, and then total load time, and depending on what scripts you're executing, these may differ. I don't actually have the details on exactly the difference right now, so we can check on MVM for that. We go into, so one of the things that can be helpful is if you're clicking from one URL to another, normally this timeline would just, or the network tab will just restart, and you'll lose everything that you had. And that's not really helpful if you want to see kind of the transition from one page to another, and all the resources that were downloaded between the two pages. So you can check this handy box preserve log, and that means that it won't re-clear the log on page load or any navigation. So it'll maintain that list there. You can filter, as mentioned, you can search to filter. You can clear with clicking that button. This button usually clears whatever tab you're in.
So Andrew, do you use this when you're working?
Yeah.
To sort of like look at,
Oh yeah, definitely.
and how do you use it, and then how do you read it? Like I did an entire thing on performance and the critical rendering path, and I know that there's like parsing, and then there's also, I don't know, just a couple different phases it all goes through, and you see that
So you can see all of that, and when we get to timeline, you'll see that in more detail. Network tab, the most useful
Oh,
thing for it. I mean, so you do see a waterfall here. I mean, sort of, right? You see at least the timeline. And you notice, for example, there were a couple scripts here at the end that took longer to load than everything else. These are probably the CDN files that I was pulling in. This is most useful for when something goes wrong. So I just added a request for bar.js. There's no such thing in my folder. So if I reload, I'm going to see right at the top this big red thing, right? That's going to tell me what is the status of that request. It was 404. There's no such script. And that's usually a sign that something went wrong. So if something doesn't seem to be loading, if maybe you're including a file and it's not getting there for whatever reason, and you're not sure why, open up the network tab and see if you see anything that's red. That's a good signal that something's wrong. You'll also see that in your console if you haven't filtered it out. So you can filter these out. If you hide network messages, it'll filter that out and tell you that it was filtered. But it might be useful to see those unless you're, like, for example, expecting something to fail. Yeah, so that's what the network tab is probably most useful for. There's certainly, the performance uses for it, and you can take a look at that, but I find it most useful for debugging. There's also this great checkbox here, disable cache. So normally, when your browser's open, you're probably supporting cache in your browser, and so files are going to be cached. When you're developing, you don't really want cache because a lot of times, if you cache a file and you change that file, your browser might still think it's cached and hasn't changed. So for developing, you can just open up Network tab, check this box. Whenever DevTools is open now, and that box is checked, your cache will be disabled. And so it's not going to cache any of these resources. If you close DevTools, then it will go back to normal caching. So if you have DevTools open and the box checks, it won't be cached. All right, any questions about Network tab?
seems like the most valuable, or some of the most valuable stuff is like 17 requests down there at the bottom, 1.1 megabyte transferred.
Yeah.
Took 227 milliseconds to load. That's kind of like, those are your benchmark performance things. You want to minimize those requests, right?
Yeah.
Get that time down.
Yeah, definitely.
Get the file size down. Do you have a sort of like goal in mind when you build? Like, I want my pages to load in 3/4 of a second, or?
It all depends on what the context is. Usually, a lot of times your company will have, or your organization, or who's ever building the application will have SLAs, service level agreements, for what basically benchmarks for where the limit is, how fast it needs to be. I don't have anything in particular for sites I work on. I mean, we do have things in particular, but they wouldn't be able to be generalized to anything else. But certainly, 280 milliseconds is usually pretty good. It's going to depend on how much content you're loading. If it's like a very photo-heavy site, for example, it's expected that it's going to take a little longer to download. That's okay. But if it's a completely text-driven site, it probably should load pretty quickly. It really depends on the context. Yeah, I mean, what you'll want to do is figure out as an organization or as a website or as a company, kind of what that level is. Like, what's the balance between what our customers want, what our customers need in terms of performance, and then what we can technically deliver in terms of what we're doing on the site. So that's a trade-off. It's always a trade-off. It's always a balance. And it's fine. It's just finding a point and sticking with it. And recognizing, if you add a little feature and it adds a whole bunch of time, maybe you need to go back and either rethink the feature or think about a better way to implement it that isn't going to be so slow. Whereas on the other hand, if you implement a huge feature, maybe it's okay that it takes a little longer to load. And keep in mind too that these are, your metrics in your browser. If your connection's slow or something, that's going to increase that number. So this is helpful for development, but it's not actually helpful for telling you what your users are experiencing, because they're going to be on all different devices, on all different networks, and they're not, maybe they're on the other side of the world and from your content, and so it's going to take a lot longer just because of the speed of light to get it to them. you know, that's a limitation that you won't see right away. Speaking of that though,
I was gonna say, but you can
we can actually simulate that.
simulate that.
So,
Click the little phone icon up there by the magnifying glass. You didn't see how he got there.
I'm going to redo that right now. I'm just restarting Chrome because it's being stubborn. Okay.